The jihadists successfully took over the base, but they accidentally released a viral strain that should never have been created. Less than 48 hours after the attack, all the terrorists were dead. Or kind of dead. The worst part was that the virus was now free. And nothing and no one could stop it from spreading like wildfire. At first, no one knew anything about it. In the old, overconfident Europe, as well as in America and Asia, life went on calmly and peacefully. During those first 72 hours, something could have been done to get the pandemic under control. However, Dagestan was a very small, very poor country. Its government didn't have the resources to stop the virus. The virus was already past the incubation phase. By then, it was too late. No one, not even our Spanish lawyer, became worried until a few days later. The first news of a rare hemorrhagic fever sweeping the Caucasus Mountains was just background noise in the newspapers and on TV, drowned out by the final picks for the European Soccer Championship and the latest political scandal. Almost no one paid attention to that virus, so it just kept spreading. A few days passed before anyone realized that something was terribly wrong. Large areas of Dagestan were dark and silent, as if there wasn't a single living soul left. The government of that tiny republic took a closer look. Terrified by what it saw, it called upon Moscow for help. The Russians were so horrified by the situation, they immediately closed their borders with Dagestan, and with every country on its border. Too late to do any good. The news started filtering out to the rest of the world, sounding at first like confusing nonsense. Then a series of conflicting reports from the Russian government, the CDC in Atlanta, and several other organizations claimed it was an outbreak of Ebola or smallpox or West Nile virus or the Marburg virus that first broke out in Germany in the 60s, or none of the above. Outrageous rumors, blown out of proportion, started to circulate. The shadow of darkness leapt from Dagestan to neighboring countries as refugees fled it, whatever it was. Putin's government declared a news blackout in an effort to get the situation under control, suppressing freedom of the press within the Russian Federation, then finally broke down and requested emergency aid from the international community. But once again, it was too late. By that time, our lawyer and most of humanity were waiting in suspense for updates on what was happening in that corner of the world. It was no longer back-page news. Reports were splashed across every front page. Despite heavy censorship, images leaked out, showing lines of refugees stretching as far as the eye could see, and columns of soldiers just as long. The more observant commentators remarked that it was strange for the army to be battling the epidemic, but they were in the minority. Most people just paid attention to the official report. Finally, international aid teams were deployed to help control the epidemic. 15 days before, they'd have had a chance for success. But not any longer. A few days later, the epidemic went global when aid teams returned home, taking with them members of their group who'd been injured by those things. Although no one realized it, the pandemic was now definitely out of control. The logical thing would have been to eliminate anyone infected, since governments were beginning to understand what they were facing, but political interests and public opinion overrode common sense. The last chance to control the pandemic evaporated, and the virus began its deadly march, turning the pandemic into an apocalypse. At that point, our Spanish lawyer was as terrified as the rest of the world. Reports of the pandemic raged non-stop on newspapers, TV, radio, and the internet. He watched helplessly as the virus slowly gained ground day by day. Soon there was no news from Dagestan. Russia went dark a few days later, then Poland, Finland, Turkey, Iran, and on throughout every country in the world. Most European countries sealed off their borders and declared martial law, but the virus spread like an oil spill across the planet. In an unprecedented move, the European Union unanimously agreed to form a single office of crisis management that continued to keep a tight grip on information and doled out the news in dribs and drabs. But reports kept turning up on the internet. There were almost as many theories and unsettling rumors